Let me just ask you this before we move on to the VP thing. What do you think of the, like, we actually are going to talk about this a little more in the VP conversation, but what do you think of the, like, these people are just weird thing?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is, I'm gonna say this for everybody else. It is very difficult for me to be objective. JD is somebody who I've known for a long time. I knew him on a personal level. So it is hard for me to sit here and to separate my own personal feelings and not. So I've tried to take a poll of the women in my life and others who I talk to, and I think it breaks along relatively partisan lines. So amongst my pro-life friends, they don't care at all about the JD cat lady comments. That said, my Democratic friends or like lean socially liberal, they were never gonna vote for Trump either, but it does really piss them off. So my question is then, well, were you ever gonna vote? Are you really gonna vote on this? Were you already voting for Biden or not? The weird thing is where, look, and again, you know, this is very difficult for me because it's like, well, what do people find weird? I think for a lot of women, people, the whole childless cat lady thing, it pisses them off. But then if you're like right wing, you're like, okay, well, what pisses you off? What do you find weird? Like drag queen, transgenderism, they've got a bunch of trans flags here in the Kamala ad. I find that quite weird, but that's not what liberal people find weird. So that's where I'm like, it's gonna be about what you personally find weird and objectionable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's the only way I can put it. I think it's very in the eye of the beholder, and I remain to be seen how it actually will be digested by the public.
I think it's so much better messaging than the like, we must restore democracy.
Yeah,
you know?
That's
it just it's like the way that a normal person would talk about a person, a candidate, et cetera. And, you know, taking Trump and JD out of it because I don't want to, you know, it's uncomfortable for me. Also knowing he's your friend, whatever.
We will have a panel tomorrow where we're going to
dig into the childless cat lady situation. But, you know, I think part of why Republicans underperformed in 2022 was we've been saying extremism, right? Stop the steal and, you know, abortion and this group of issues that just read as like fringe extremism. Weird is sort of like a normie way of defining that, is like you guys are in these, you know, weird online niche subcultures floating crazy ideas like, oh, if you have more kids you have, the more you get to vote, which is pretty antithetical to the way most people feel like, okay, one person, one vote seems like kind of a thing we've been doing here for a while and seems like a pretty good bedrock principle. So I think that putting that vibe and that label over everything they do is honestly kind of Trumpy. Like the way he's in the past with Crooked Hillary, for example, been able to tag her with a label that then everything kind of feeds into and it creates this overarching image. I actually think it is very effective. And it's interesting, and this can help us segue after I get your reaction to the VP thing, because it was Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, who came up with that, the former high school teacher who has this, you know, sense of how to talk to normal people very clearly, who had workshopped this and gotten big response to it. And he says it on cable news and it just takes off because it landed in this way of like, yeah, that's it. That's the way to kind of frame this whole thing that's going on.
I would put it this way. It connects to why Republicans lost in 2022, which was, it was about election denialism, right? It was about the whole like stop the steal vibe of Trump sycophancy. But a lot of it is, and this is where, look, this is my biggest difference from JD and many other Republicans, is I'm not Christian. I'm not like a hardcore Christian. And that is weird because in America today, much to the chagrin of my Christian friends, we are a very socially liberal country compared to where we were 10 years ago, compared to where we go 25 years ago. We live in a different America. Social libertarianism is the predominant strain of how most people view social issues, even on the trans thing. It's not so much that the objection for the average person is like, oh, well, we need to block this and ban it. It's like, well, some people should be able to make their own choice up until the age of 18, but let's keep it away from kids, right? And that's actually very different than the way if you were to ask conservative Catholics, they're like, no, we need to ban this straight up.
That's right.
And then same with abortion, where anybody who's trying to tell you what to do, the social ninnyism, there is a social ninnyism of the BLM moment where everyone's like, if you're not actively anti-racist, then you're a racist. It's like, hold on, don't tell me who the fuck I am, all right? Like, I have my own ideas. Don't tell me to use certain pronouns, etc. Well, this is kind of the like as a person who grew up amongst evangelical Christians in the 90s in Texas, I understand this viscerally and deeply, where when people try to tell you how to live your life, whenever what you're doing, it's fucking annoying. Part of the reason I hate the modern left. That's exactly the same why. So there it gets to the telling you what to do and being, because authoritarian is not even the right word, but being prescriptive based on something that the vast majority of the Americans no longer quote unquote believe in, that is where I think it probably connects more than anything. And I think that's the kindest way I can put this.
Well, there's a whole ecosystem incentive also, and I see this on the left too, where the way to get clout is to be as like edgy and controversial.
Yeah, that's correct.
So specifically with regard to JD Vance and him talking about parents, whatever, like if you're gonna come out in favor of a child tax credit, first of all, our tax code already advantages
that is what's pissed me off.
But hold on, let me just finish my thought. But if you're gonna come out in favor of child tax credit, okay, 70% of the country agrees with you.
Yeah.
But he intentionally phrased it in a way to make it feel edgy and like counterculture, because that's what is rewarded in online ecosystems. And he, you know, he's kind of had to like prove himself to the MAGA base because he was the guy who was saying Trump may be America's Hitler and all of this. So he's had to prove himself really hardcore. So he phrases it in a way rather than like, hey, you know, like parenthood is amazing and we need to help parents and families and kids, et cetera. Instead, it's like, we need to judge and punish those who are childless and don't have kids. And so he framed it in the most possible, intentionally framed it in the most like off-putting, like what the hell are you talking about? This is weird kind of a way, because all of the rewards in the ecosystem are to being edgy and fringe. Versus, you know, in a previous media ecosystem, all of the rewards would be, how do I frame my policy in a way that appeals broadly to people and makes the best case for it and doesn't like instantly repel half the population?
I don't think it's a mistake that the clips that have gone viral about JD are all when he was running in the Republican primary.
That's right.
Josh McDowell,
yeah, that's exactly right.
2021, right? And that's when he was on Tucker, and that's when he was trying to appeal
be as MAGA as
possible. And I don't think it's a mistake that those of what's gone most viral, because that's not really how he's talked since post 2022, right? And that is, I would say, a lesson to people out there. It's also very indicative of the left, right? Where we had the same, like, you have to prove your bona fides and shibboleths. And actually, a lot of the Republican attack ads on Kamala are coming from the Democratic debates and the primary. Don't think it's a mistake. Healthcare to illegal immigrants. You're not running on that in a general election, but there's a clip and it exists. So, yeah, I think you're correct. There definitely is a reward system that is built and all of that. I will just say on the policy, seeing Dave Portnoy and these people freak out about it, he's like, why should I have to pay taxes more as a childless person? It's like, well, you already do, dude. The US tax code is built to incentivize marriage and having children, just so we all understand. Dependence and the marriage penalty, quote unquote, the marriage incentive where you have a higher deduction limit, et cetera. So the US tax code is already built that way. I'm just saying. So all of you, if you think that the progressive tax code or whatever is fair, then you agree with that baseline message. And that's the only thing that's annoyed me, is there is this weird libertarian instinct where like, if you can't have kids, or if you can't afford to have kids, then you shouldn't have any kids. And it's like, well, what society we do want to live in? Mr. Portnoy is worth $200 million or whatever. So I will just say that. But that is a tension. I agree with you. Although
I do feel like I don't know all the ins and outs of his politics, but I feel like it could. I mean, he is like a conservative Republican. Like
he's a libertarian, like straight up.
But that makes sense from a libertarian perspective. His position is consistent with a libertarian perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
No, you're right. But I mean, I think that's a stupid view.
I don't agree with it.
Yeah, it's like obviously, if you live in a society, the tax code is already built. The tax code is built to incentivize at a personal level, getting married, having children, starting a business, and owning real estate. Basically, those four. Actually, now solar, if we include the IRA. I think that's fine. I think those are good things. We should use the tax code to try and have more socially desirable outcomes. 99.9% of people at an individual level would agree with me on that. Then, yes, whenever it comes to the framing, et cetera, I would just say that the incentive structures for winning a Republican primary do not always, obviously come out to being beneficial in a general election. And that is part of what led so many Republicans down a path to defeat back in 2022. Blake Masters is another perfect example where you had a guy running in Arizona who has to out-MAGA everybody else. And what does he do? He starts talking about not just repealing Roe versus Wade and national pro-life legislation. He starts talking about going after like Griswold and like birth control, right? And people are like, whoa, hold on a second, dude. What's happening here? And again, that was an incentive structure that was built in to winning a hard right. I mean, if you look at what he's running right now, him versus, I don't even know this guy's name, Abe Hamida or whatever.
Yeah.
This is a crazy primary. It's all about who's more MAGA and American.
Both of them, right?
Yeah, Trump has now endorsed both of them, was the most Trump thing of all time. Carrie Lake is backing Abe. So even figuring out who's the most MAGA in the race,
Right.
If you guys want to go see real madness, go look at some of the ads they're running against each
again,
other.
the other problem with Blake Masters was that he just came off as weird.
His came out as a weird guy. There's no question.
Like in his ads, in his public appearances, you were just like, this guy is weird. And then you hear, his ideas also feel weird and fringe, whatever. But that's why I think the tag does work. I do think that it is effective. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how they respond to all of this. And I also don't want to overstate how much the VP pick matters.
Yes, that's a good point.
But I do think that having JD Vance on the ticket with Trump, especially now that you have Kamala Harris as the Democrats' choice, like it makes the contrast more stark. It makes it easier for them to land those sorts of attacks. And then just one other thing that's like, just my nerdy self gets irritated about this conversation is like, it was Democrats who supported the child tax credit overwhelmingly. Yeah. So if we're like in the business of, we should have a child tax credit, it's like, you're right, Kamala Harris supported one and the Republicans didn't, so.
Yeah, fair point, especially if you're talking about Mitch McConnell and all of that. I think my advice for the Republicans is stop playing like media game. I saw Vivek being like, it's not weird, it's June. And I'm like, guys, when you are defending, what is the ironclad rule in politics? When you're explaining yourself or defending yourself, you lost. So what do? We don't talk about weird. We're talking about immigration because that's the number one area where most Americans agree with Republicans and Trump, and we're not talking about abortion. That's the only thing that we're talking about. In fact, something that JD did, which I thought was smart, is I don't exactly know what happened, but Kamala was like, watching him transform back into a normie Republican is interesting to me because in the primary and all of that, a lot of this didn't come out, but you forget how general election politics really works. If something about Kamala questions, like, what has he ever done for this country? I think it was something like that. And he's like, I was a Marine in Iraq, I served my country, and I raised, I fought for my country. And I was like, oh, this is such a return to like 2004, just like almost like Republican tropes about who's served and who's not. But you forget that actually lands with a lot of people. He has not, defended himself or whatever against Weird, and I would not play that game. That's not a game that I think you're going to win because it's a frame which you don't even want to be in the conversation.
You're fighting on their battleground.
Exactly.
It's just like if Hillary Clinton was out there being like, I'm not crooked. It's like, okay, well now we're just fighting on their...
She did fight on
right, and that's why she didn't work, right? I mean, so anytime you're fighting on the battleground, your enemy lays down, you are likely losing.
100%.
And it's something that Trump has been brilliant.
Yeah, change the conversation.
That has been his greatest political skill, has being able to set the terms of the conversation. And so I think it has to be driving him insane that, we're weeks after his assassination attempt and no one's talking about that, like searches for it have fallen off a cliff. All of the cable news discussion, et cetera, news media discussion is around Kamala, who her VP pick is going to be, and isn't JD Vance weird, and childless cat ladies, and it has been a rare period where Democrats have actually been setting the terms of the conversation, and I don't think that they'll be able to continue that indefinitely because this is a skill he continues to possess, and he'll say something wild and send everybody else into a frenzy to discuss it, et cetera, et cetera. But that's part of why she has come up in the polls so quickly. The race is completely reset is because they have been very effective at, and listen, the media wants them to succeed. So I don't want to deny that outside of Fox News, wants them to succeed. But they are playing the cards they've been dealt very well right now, which almost never happens.
So the media's calling it honeymoon phase, and I think I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
That's it. We are in the honeymoon phase of the Democrats. There will be a disastrous interview coming soon. There will be a Trump comment coming soon. There will be, listen, we're going to the DNC. Some crazy shit's going to go down at the DNC. DNC. I don't know what. Maybe some uncommitted delegates are going to scream in the middle of the thing. Maybe somebody's going to try and challenge her. The speech is going to go wrong. Plagiarism, we never know. And that's the thing in America. If the last 2 months have taught you anything, is that things can change.
We don't freaking know anything.
Yeah. Things can change, folks. So never just think that whatever the current dynamic is going to go on forever, because it could be that 2 months from now, we won't even remember this entire conversation. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.